All right, today we're going to break down one of the biggest industrial disasters of our time, the Deepwater Horizon explosion back in 2010. It's this incredible case study on risk, on who's responsible, and just what happens when things go completely, catastrophically sideways.
So everything really hinges on this one date. For the 126 people who were on that drilling rig, this was the day their world was turned upside down. And for the rest of us, well, it was the beginning of an environmental and corporate nightmare.
I mean, look at this. A catastrophic explosion. It was so violent it killed 11 crew members. That explosion then triggered the largest marine oil spill we've ever seen. And of course, it kicked off a corporate crisis that was just absolutely massive. Which leads us to the big question, right? How in the world does one of the most advanced, most sophisticated drilling rigs on the planet fail this badly? The thing is, the answer isn't just one thing. It's more like a series of failures, like ripples spreading out from a stone thrown in the water.
Okay, so let's look at that first ripple, this cascade of failures. This is the ground zero of the disaster. What happened right there on the rig.
So when investigators looked into it, they basically found two big problems. First, you've got operational risk, which is just a fancy way of saying the technical screw-ups, the actual mistakes made on the job. But the bigger issue, the one underneath all of that, was about the safety culture. In other words, yeah, the equipment failed, but the human systems that were supposed to keep everyone safe, they failed first. And at the core of that whole safety culture problem was this huge clash. On one hand, the official talk, the rhetoric, was all about being efficient, saving money, moving fast. But what was actually happening? The reality was that all that pressure led to some really dangerous trade-offs, where safety got pushed to the side. A culture started to form where cutting corners and taking risks just became, well, normal. And that risky culture, it directly led to this chain reaction, this domino effect of technical screw-ups. First, the cement job that was supposed to seal the well was flawed. Then, the crew completely misread a crucial pressure test, a test that should have been a giant flashing red light. So when that high-pressure gas started shooting up the pipe, they couldn't get it under control. And the very last line of defense, the one thing that was supposed to prevent this exact scenario, the blowout preventer, it failed, just completely failed. Every single one of these steps was a chance to stop the disaster, and every single one was missed.
So that leads us to the second ripple. With such a clear chain of things going wrong, you have to ask, who was responsible? Well, as it turns out, that's where things get really complicated.
Yeah, this wasn't just one company's fault, not even close. When investigators started digging, they found this tangled web of shared responsibility. You couldn't just point the finger at one single company. So let's break down who was involved. Really, three major players ended up sharing the blame. First, you have BP. They were the main operator, and they were the ones pushing to cut costs and speed things up. Then there's Transocean. They actually owned the rig, and they were responsible for maintaining the safety equipment. Like that blow-up preventer that didn't work. And finally, you had Halliburton, the contractor who did that faulty cement job that basically kicked this whole thing off. And after all the lawsuits, all the years of legal fights, this is how the courts finally broke it down. You can see BP got hit with the biggest chunk of the blame, and by a lot. Makes sense since they were running the whole show. But Transocean and Halliburton were absolutely held legally responsible too, for the critical parts they played in the disaster. Okay, that brings us to our third ripple, paying the price. What were the real consequences of all this? What was the actual cost? Well, first off, just look at the money. The financial cost was absolutely staggering. For BP alone, we're talking tens of billions of dollars. Just an unbelievable amount, making it one of the most expensive corporate disasters ever. But the fallout was so much bigger than just the money. I mean, yeah, you have the massive financial costs and the huge legal fines, but look at this third piece, the strategic shift. This disaster literally forced BP to change its entire game plan. They had to sell off huge parts of the company and completely rethink how they handled risky projects. It fundamentally reshaped the whole corporation. And the impact didn't stop with BP. It sent shockwaves across the entire industry. After the spill, regulators stepped in and basically created a whole new rulebook for offshore drilling. We're talking way stricter standards for equipment, much more intense oversight from the government, and brand new requirements for how companies have to be ready to contain a spill if it happens again. And that takes us to our final ripple, which is maybe the biggest one of all.
This is about how the disaster completely changed how the public sees these big energy companies, and it shifted the very ground they operate on.
It really all boils down to this idea of a social license to operate. Now, this isn't a piece of paper, it's not a legal permit. It's the trust that we, the public, give a company or an industry, believing they're acting responsibly. And Deepwater Horizon, it absolutely shattered that trust, not just for BP, but for the whole offshore drilling industry. Think about it. Before this, the risks of deepwater drilling were kind of an abstract idea for most people. But after the spill, you saw it on the news every single night for months. It became terrifyingly real. And that kicked off this huge, intense public debate about the real risks and rewards of drilling for oil, a conversation that honestly we're still having today.
And so that leaves us with this one final, really critical question. After all of this, after seeing the chain of failures, how the blame was split, the staggering costs, was it enough? Did the legacy of Deepwater Horizon actually create a strong enough deterrent to stop something this catastrophic from happening all over again? That's the real question, isn't it?